Hello guys, how are you? Hopefully doing fine. In my last video, I was talking about what I love in machine learning. In this video, I would talk about what I hate in machine learning. And again, there'll be four things, right? So the first one is the role of machine learning. The second one is that is actually overhyped. I'll talk about that. The third one, that there's no artificial intelligence. And number four, about the role of machine learning engineer, who is this guy and what he's doing. So number one, the role. If you're starting with machine learning and you would go through the books, tutorials, and especially if you come from enterprise domain, you would be interested in how you could apply ML for daily use cases, in some practical cases. And you would find examples and advices where people would tell you that you could use ML for such use cases like invoice processing. For example, you could automatically check if invoice should be paid or it should be escalated to a supervisor based on certain parameters of the invoice. And rightfully, this would help to automate the job, and it would help to process the volume of the invoices. That's correct. And you would get advice to collect historical data. Based on that historical data, train the model, and the model would then do processing automatically. But then the question comes, why you would do that? Because you could just have a regular function implemented in Java, JavaScript, PHP, any kind of language, Python, for example, and you could do the same processing. You don't need to use machine learning to solve this kind of obvious task which you could implement with typical if-else, for, while loops and functions and so on. So it would be overcomplication because you would need to train the model, you would need to maintain it, and if data changes, you would need to retrain it as well, and so on. So I would think that it makes sense to use machine learning for more advanced use cases where it's not obvious to how to code the logic by yourself, where you would need to extract some hidden patterns from the data or identify some logic which is not obvious to implement the algorithm to process that logic to actually get some patterns from the data, right? So this is where machine learning would be applied, but not for straightforward use cases. And this is what I hate in ML is that, it's not the problem probably of ML itself, it's a problem of the people who are talking about ML and trying to jump into the hype and say, look, this is how you could use ML for enterprise. And then people from different industries and companies, they get wrong impression that they could just replace everything with ML, but that's not true. Very often it makes more sense just to do regular implementation to code logic by yourself. Okay, the second point is ML is overhyped because everyone talks about it, and this kind of relates to the first point. And everyone talks about it. Everyone says that everyone must use it, but this is not true because you need to use ML if it makes sense. If it helps to automate the things, and if the same thing cannot be automated in an easier way by implementing logic by yourself. So definitely ML is not suitable for everyone, and I don't think that ML, it makes sense to use everywhere. It makes sense to use it only for certain use cases which you cannot implement in Java, for example. Number three, there is no artificial intelligence. Yeah, maybe there is some intelligence. It's hard to say, maybe I'm wrong, but the way it looks to me, there is no artificial intelligence because the way when you train like deep learning network with ML, you feed the data, right? And then the algorithm basically identifies the patterns from the data. It constructs the model. And in the future, when new data comes, based on those rules that were encoded into the model, future data will be classified and or regression will be calculated, and you'll get the result. But the problem comes when you have a data that comes in the future which was not present in a training data set, what happens then? And then you would start getting very strange and annoying results that model would still think that this new data belongs to the data that was from training set, and you may get this new data classified as certain to the certain class that was present in training data set, but really this would be completely something else, and so on. So with ML, it's hard to handle exceptions. So this is what I see, that you can handle patterns. It can learn patterns from the data, and it can identify groups very well. But as soon as you would have some data which was not included in training data set, it would fail badly. And this means that you need to have additional layer of logic to make sure that data which comes, it would be represented in training data set and then send it to the ML model. Otherwise, I think it will fail, and it will not handle unseen data automatically. And finally, the last point is, who is machine learning engineer in general? Because ML field is so huge, and actually, if we talk about ML implementation, model construction is around 20% of work. The rest, 80%, is data processing, automation, for example, model retraining to detect when model needs to be retrained, when this new data is coming and data drift is happening, UI implementation, API implementation, and so on. So what does machine learning engineer? It's a bit ambiguous to me. And as ML overall is a relatively new field, I think still the rules are not defined clearly. It's not certain what ML engineer needs to do. And probably it depends from company to company, and one company would expect one thing, another company would expect another thing. And you often would hear that it's job market for ML is huge and it's easy to find a job. But you should be careful, because since ML, the field is huge, and it might be a situation when company would hire ML engineer and they would have one expectation, and you would think that you are a strong ML engineer, you would apply there, and then you would fail, because then it could be that your knowledge is completely unrelated to whatever that company is looking. So it's becomes more tricky than to the old days when, let's say, you was applying for Java position, because if you know Java, then you could solve the interview and you could get to the company. But with ML is more tricky, because it's unclear. Rules are unclear, like what ML engineer needs to know in general, because it's so huge. Anyway, but having said that, I love ML more than I hate it, and I'll continue my journey, and I'll keep pushing into the ML, and let's see where I'll come. And anyway, see you next time, and stay safe. Bye.